Greetings fellow Mist Wanderers, my name is Steve Morgan and this is DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. I was flicking through my copy of Van Richten's guide, looking for ideas for videos, and I remembered something I used once, and it's something I think is kind of easily missed, because it's in the last chapter, where, and I don't know about you folks, but when I think of the last chapter of some of these books, I just think of that as the monster stat block chapter, but there's some information preceding that that's kind of handy, and it's all about running horror monsters, and there's a few different points it covers. There's monstrous origins, notorious monsters, describing monsters, monstrous tactics, monstrous traits, and the subject of today's videos, monstrous minions. The idea being that you can give minions additional abilities or traits that will help a boss battle, maybe support the boss. It could be your big BBEG battle or a really important boss battle, and you don't want the boss basically killed in the first round. You want them to potentially survive a little bit longer. And this isn't the standard just add minions to your boss battle. Hopefully you're doing that already. Having a monster on its own, even a really strong one with the whole, I'm not going to get into it here, but you might have probably heard about action economy. 6 PCs if you have that many, even like 3 or 4 versus just one enemy. That enemy is going to get some big hits against it. But then you add in minions, and then this is additional stuff you give those minions. And even though this comes from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, this is not just a Ravenloft thing. You could use this in Curse of Strahd. You can use this in any adventure, in any setting. I think the advice in this is great. And for any boss, anywhere, in any situation, you can consider having these abilities and it adding a bit more flavour. And I'm going to talk about my experience using it when I ran Baba Lysaga. But I ran the Baba Lysaga battle a bit different to, I think, 99% of most COS DMs, because it didn't take place in Berez, as I'll get to later. And my plans for Azalin Rex, the BBEG in my campaign, the sort of wider Ravenloft post-Curse of Strahd campaign I'm running now. And when they get to fighting him, I've got some ideas there about how to use these monstrous minion traits. There are 5 in total. I'm only going to talk about... Well, I'm going to talk about all 5, but I'm going to talk about 2 that I used and plan to use. And I will talk about the other 3 later because I think they work really well for one domain in particular. The 2 I'm going to talk about are called Sacrificial Minion and Selfless Bodyguard. Sacrificial Minion, when the minion dies, its master regains hit points equal to 4 times the minion's challenge rating, as long as the master is within 100 feet of it. So essentially, it gives the opportunity for your boss to recover a little bit of hit points when one of the minions is taken out. And Selfless Bodyguard, when an attack hits its master and the minion is within 5 feet of its master, the minion can use its action to make the attack hit itself instead. So that's great. You have some minions stood next to the boss and they target the boss, but the minion takes the damage instead of the boss. I like to flavour this as some sort of like jumping in the way and taking the hit instead. I think Paladins, or at least a subclass of Paladins, have this ability, because the Paladin player PC in my game has this ability they use every now and again where they're 5 feet within an ally taking damage. They're like, oh, I'll take the damage instead. It's that kind of thing. And it uses their reaction as well. So they can only do it once per round, and they can't use their reaction for anything else. For instance, if it was a mage and they wanted to then use, say, counterspell or shield, they can't. They've used their reaction for this instead. So for that particular trait, you need to have some minions stood within 5 feet of the boss. For the other one, they can be within 100 feet. So, it's kind of a bigger map and a bigger area where the battle is taking place. You've got a bit more space to play with there. So let me talk about how I used this with relatively moderate success for Baba Lysaga. So it's a long story. We finished Curse of Strahd earlier than expected, and my players are completionists, but they didn't do Berez and the Amber Temple. I had a whole thing about, because Baba Lysaga was still alive after Strahd's defeat, and then when they returned to Barovia a little later on into our Ravenloft campaign, because they wanted to tie up loose ends, such as Berez and the Amber Temple, I had it that, Baba Lysaga went to the Amber Temple. So they went to Berez first of all and just fought the hut on its own with some witches and other minions, the scarecrows. Then they went to the Amber Temple, and then that Baba had been there, so she mined some of the Amber vestiges, and then they later fought her in the Castle Ravenloft catacombs, and specifically by the King and Queen's tomb. This is a whole thing about she was trying to bring Strahd's father, King Barovia, back from the dead. It's a whole weird thing. And I thought at this point my players were over level 10, albeit there was only 2 of them at the time, and they had a couple of NPC allies. But Baba, especially in quite close quarters, not being able to ride around in a skull necessarily, I thought, well, I need to make her a little bit stronger. So I gave her minions in the forms of swarms of insects, in brackets, flies. And I don't feel like I was going way off script here, because if you read the Berez chapter in Curse of Strahd, or it says that Berez has swarms of insects, brackets, flies, that fly around and can be annoying. So I had it that there were 4 swarms of insects just kind of buzzing around her, sort of protecting her. And for flavour, it was almost like if they, say, fired an arrow at her on an Eldritch Blast, the flies fly in front of her and block the damage. But it wasn't very effective for a couple of reasons. Firstly, swarms of flies are only a challenge rating of half. So with the whole Sacrificial Minion thing, when one of them died, Baba recovered a grand total of 2 HP. So I think I had 4 of them, so at the most they recovered her 8 HP. Wow. There was also another thing. The wizard PC cast Fireball. So just threw a Fireball there, bang. Obviously Baba only took a bit of damage from that because she's got a lot of HP, but they pretty much insta-killed, or at least took a massive chunk of damage off the swarms of flies. And then she recovered probably her 8 HP, and she no longer had her minions protecting her. So it didn't work as well I was kind of hoping, and I should have seen that coming because I knew the wizard had Fireball. I knew they could do stuff like that. But, you know, it was still thematic. It was still quite unique having these flies buzzing around and Baba absorbing their HP and then sort of protecting her if it wasn't an AoE spell. However, I've learned from this. As DMs, we learn from our mistakes all the time, don't we? And I've got a better plan in place for when I do all this again later. So the BBEG of my campaign, when we finally get to the end part, is going to be Azalin Rex, the infamous Ravenloft lich. The end game is going to be in Darkon, and the final battle is going to be in the King's Tier, which is this floating, it's supposed to be this star that hangs in the sky of Darkon. I'm having it be a floating amber dungeon. I think I got that from one of the Ravenloft Mist Hunters modules. I don't think I made that up myself. And I talk more about this, or the setup for this, in my upcoming plans video I put out a few weeks ago. For Azalin, I'm planning to use the lich stat block, naturally, plus I'm going to give him a bunch of minions. And I did a video where I talked about Azalin's minions, and a few of them, including I think like a Blackguard Paladin, are going to be there in the battle as well. And the lich stat block doesn't have a huge amount of HP. It has 135 HP if you look at the 2014 Monster Manual. It's a good point, actually. I don't know if it has more in the 2024 one. Oh wow, yes it does. 315 HP. So they ramped up the lich's HP for the new version, but I'm still running a 2014 game, so I want to use the 2014 lich. And there's an argument for it's Azalin Rex. I should be using a custom stat block, like how Vecna, I'm pretty sure, has one, instead of just using a lich stat block for Vecna. But I'm a big fan of the monsters know what they're doing, and he's written a whole article on if you run a lich, this is all the tactics you should do. If I use the custom stat block, that potentially goes out the window. Sorry, I know I'm going a bit off on a tangent here. I just want to explain why I really want to use the lich stat block for Azalin Rex. I think it'll be a much more memorable battle using it with the monsters know info than using something else. I'm going to have Azalin flanked by 2 whites. They're challenge rating 3, so he recovers 12 hit points when one dies, so a little bit better than the swarms of flies. And Azalin's opening move is going to be casting Globe of Invulnerability, so that Fireball doesn't kill them. We'll learn from that Baba mistake. I'm going to have some minions. It's going to be like rows of minions, I think. So a couple, so say if they start at the south of the map, and Azalin will be right at the top at the north with these 2 whites. Maybe somebody who can cast Counterspell, like a Deathlock Mastermind. I think the Legacy version has Counterspell. Then they've got to work their way through the minions as they try and get their way to Azalin. So it's going to be harder that they, go for Azalin first anyway. And if he casts Globe and Vulnerability, then that's going to make it even harder for them to get some hits on him. Plus, those whites, if they take ranged attacks like a bow and arrow, for example, then the whites will jump in the way and take those hits through the Selfless Bodyguard trait. And the other minions, the ones who are slightly further away, if they're within 100 feet, Azalin can take the HP from them. So I think one of them I got in mind is going to be like a challenge rating 10, so he'll recover like 40 HP at that point. And I like the idea as well, like, I feel this works well for somebody like Azalin, because Azalin is a lich, he's a necromancer. It makes sense that he makes undead that he can then absorb the sort of essence from when they die. And even like the Blackguard I talked about earlier, he is sort of devoted and given his life to Azalin for the cause. And so if he dies, I think he's got some sort of bond, even though he's not undead, he's got some sort of bond with Azalin that happens as well. And any sort of like warlocks who have Azalin as their patron, that could apply as well. So I got a feeling it's going to work a lot better for Azalin for those reasons. I'll obviously have to let you know once I run the final battle with Azalin, but that could be months, maybe even a year or so away yet. Guess we'll see. And who else could benefit from these abilities? Well, any boss really. Any boss where it makes sense for them to have minions, which most bosses should do, I guess. A few examples might include Strahd in Barovia, in Curse of Strahd. He can summon swarms of bats, plus if you're having the battle in the catacombs, there's loads of swarms of bats that maybe fly down within 5 feet of him. Do like I said with Baba, with the flies sort of surrounding her, you could have swarms of bats surrounding him. Tricky though, because, you know, Strahd probably doesn't need the help, and Strahd, it's probably, if you're running Strahd properly, I did a whole video about his battle tactics, he's probably going to be quite mobile moving around, so it's unlikely he's going to be in a situation where he stands still with a swarm of bats 5 feet of him. Other Darklords and bosses could include Harkon Lucas in Cartacus, could be other werewolves. Lord Godefroy in Mordant, he's a ghost and there's loads of ghosts, just put some other ghosts next to him. And Jacqueline Renier in Rishamelo, if that's how that's pronounced, she's like Rat Queen. She's a were-rat, all of her family are were-rats. She can basically probably control rats, so have some swarms of rats circling around her, and the rats take the damage instead. And so on and so on. It's just a small handful. You can probably apply this kind of logic to any of the Darklords, any of the bosses in any D&D ever. Before I wrap up, I want to talk about the 3 other traits. So I talked about Sacrificial Minion, and I talked about Selfless Bodyguard, but there's 3 others, and they're all quite sort of thematically similar, and I think there's a domain where this would work perfectly. Alien Mind. If a creature tries to read the minion's thoughts, that creature must succeed on intelligence saving throw with a DC equal to 10 plus the minion's intelligence modifier, or be stunned for 1 minute. The stunned creature can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success. That's the first one. Minion's Mind. The minion can't be compelled to act in a way contrary to his master's instructions. And the third one, Telepathic Minion. The minion and its master can communicate telepathically with each other as long as they're on the same plane of existence. I think all 3 of these would work really well in Blurtspur, the Mind Flayer domain of dread. Just because it's all kind of mind related, maybe it's because it had the word alien mind. I just think that kind of thing. So they try and read the thoughts of somebody in Blurtspur. In addition to it not working, they've got the potential to be stunned, and the fact that it's kind of thinking about like the Elder Brain, I think it's called, where, everyone's kind of connected and can be talked to anyone anyway, but maybe extend that beyond sort of minions that don't have that connection to the Elder Brain. Any of the enemies kind of communicate with any of the other enemies, that kind of thing. And I'm sure there's other domains where those could work really well, but I just think Blurtspur would be ideal. So if you're running Blurtspur, keep those in mind. What else? Have you used any of these? Did you use it on a boss or a Darklord? How did it go? Did you make your own? Please leave a comment letting me know. I'd love to hear more, and I'm sure other people watching this video would love to know more as well. That's it for this one. What have I got coming up? So I've teased this for a long time, been putting it off. Ravenloft factions is probably a video I'm going to do. Through rooting around in Van Richten's guide, I've been thinking of doing a video about the lineages. I'm sure there's been millions of other people who have covered them at the time when Van Richten's guide first came out. This is Dampier, Reborn, and I want to say Hexblood. But I also found it one that never made it past UA, that I don't think is tied to any of these, but it does feel like it could have been a lineage. And a lineage as well that I'm surprised didn't turn up. So I'm going to talk about those, plus some others. Aslan Part 2 coming soon. My reworking of Blaustein coming soon. I'll do both of those once I've run them in my campaign. And a whole bunch more, I'm sure. And we'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Wanderers.